Yeah, no, not at all.
All right, welcome to Minerals for Migraines. This is my first live interview, and today I'm going to be interviewing the lovely Kimberly Williams. You may be familiar with her story from my previous blog post that I sent out last week, where I did an overview of the hair tissue mineral analysis that I did for her and also the follow-up analysis and the improvements that we were able to see in her mercury levels, which we believe have probably mostly come from the amalgams and dental work, although she has a history of many of the other, pharmaceuticals that most of us have been exposed to, including antibiotics and vaccines and hormonal birth control. So today, I'll let Kimberly talk about some of the symptoms, but just want to put it out there that this is just a video for educational purposes only, and I am not a doctor. And I'm also not an expert in heavy metal detox or removal, but I do see a lot of heavy metal showing up in the hair tissue mineral analysis of people who come to me for mineral balancing. And so today we're going to be learning a lot from Kimberly herself about what she's learned about removing heavy metals and mercury and some of these more obscure minerals like strontium. And we're going to later talk about some of the more emotional and spiritual aspects of healing and how Kimberly, finds the strength within herself to go through more pain in order to get better. So let's see. Yes, I want to start off, Kimberly, if you could just share with us sort of the constellation of symptoms that you were experiencing. Migraine was one of them, but what other symptoms did you have recently, and when did they start and why?
Yeah. Okay. So really, it goes back to childhood. So I won't spend too much time talking about super early childhood, but I think it is important to bring it up because I did have vaccinations as a baby and a young infant, and both my parents were in really ill health when I was conceived, and I was the third born child, and I had really bad eczema. And I was allergic to wool. My skin was like, my cheeks are always red and puffy and all the pictures. Had allergies, like a lot of sinus, chronic sinus stuff from really young age. And then when I got into my teenage years, the headaches started. And I had Epstein-Barr virus. Oh, well, I've started calling it Epstein-Barr because everyone does, but we call it glandular fever in the UK. So I had glandular, and I spent so much time off school. In secondary school, I spent a total of almost a year off. I was really behind on a lot of schoolwork, and it was stressful, and the headaches became chronic. So I was having headaches just every day at school. And then when I was in my late teenage years, so, like 16, 17 years old, I still had the headaches, but they weren't as bad as they had been before. But something new started, and that was the heart palpitations. So I developed something called supraventricular tachycardia, which I don't know if I must have mentioned it to you before. And that was quite bad. And I was put on a medication for that, beta blockers, almost straight away. And I was dealing with anxiety as well. So I remember going to see my GP, and they said, well, you have heart palpitations, headaches, and anxiety and a lot of stress. So this beta blocker, propranolol, it would be like the best option because it's going to treat all of the symptoms. And looking back on that now, I was put on such a high dose at the age of 16. And it basically just made me so fatigued and so tired. It did calm my heart palpitations down, but it meant I was so fatigued that I just spent tons of time in bed, and kind of lost. My mum, she always describes it as I lost my personality. And I remember she took me to see the doctor, and she said, you know, this isn't right. I don't think she should be on this medication. I feel like she's lost her personality. And the doctor said, these drugs don't affect mood. So that's not possible. You know, your daughter's, maybe
Yeah,
she's
moms don't know
moody.
anything about their kids, right? Moms
Yeah.
are just totally out of touch. Yeah.
Oh my God, my mum is so badass because she's dealt with so much with my brother being ill from a vaccination and meningitis, and that's a whole nother story. But she's, you know, she advocates for us, and yeah, and I stayed on the medication, but I just came down on the dosage, and I used it, like I always had it on prescription. I always had it at home, the propranolol, and also Migraleaf. I don't know if Migraleaf is a triptan. I think it might be kind of like the really old school version of the triptans. But yeah, I was prescribed those as well. And I was taking a lot of medications, like painkillers. Also taking caffeine pills as well. So there was, you know, from a very young age, there was a lot of symptoms. Excuse me. A lot of medications, but I was okay. You know, I was not in perfect health, but I just about managed to like hold down a job, and I did go on to university, and I moved to London when I was 20. I'm almost 26 now. And when I was in London at uni, I pretty much just couldn't get out of bed. I was so tired all the time. And it was around that time when I first moved to London that these headaches that I used to get turned into migraines, and they were chronic, and it was every day. And I remember the first week of having a migraine every day, that I don't think I'd ever forget that week, because it was that moment of like, what's happening? Like, and you think straight away, well, I did, you know, because this is so severe and it's so different to anything else I'd ever experienced, and it's so painful and like affects your vision and stuff. I thought, what if I have a brain tumor? I think I need to get an MRI scan, and of course it wasn't a brain tumor, and all of my test results came back normal. I was told you're normal, but you have these migraines and you got to live with them forever. You know, that's literally what these doctors would say.
You mentioned that you had a history of hormonal birth control. I don't know how long you were on them, but was that around the time that you started them, or when?
Yes.
Because I'm, you know, since doing the blog post around hormonal birth control and all the side effects, I'm, you know, which I always intuitively, instinctively felt that of course it's doing something weird to our bodies. You know, that's why I was only on it for 6 months. But now that I know a lot more about the serious side effects, you know, you think about the impact of the overlapping effects of multiple interventions and medications. I mean, I know hormonal birth control isn't considered a medication, but it's really the only pharmaceutical that's designed to shut down a normal physiological bodily process. So you give it to someone who already has something else going on and is already on other meds, and how are these things interacting? I mean, it's just, so it's a perfect storm to really send someone into a downward spiral. And then once they're depressed and they're not getting answers from everyone, and they're just offered more medications, it can lead to total despair and depression. And
there was so much in the mix for me. The medications, the painkillers, the caffeine, the poor diet, the contraception, and of course the amalgam fillings, the antibiotics. You know, once we start to like piece it all together, and then suddenly you realize, wow, like that person who's on all those meds and is like being bombarded with all this stuff, and then, you know, they go off to university and they move to the big city. You hear it all the time, you know, young people going to uni and their health just collapses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the case for everyone, but I will go back to the contraception, but just to say briefly that on my course at university, there were 2 other girls who had chronic migraines, almost as bad as mine.
Yeah.
And wow, yeah. And there was so much like mental health issues happening, a lot of anxiety and depression amongst my peers. Like, we were all really close, and we're studying art, so we would all, you know, kind of have group therapy about it and make artwork about it, but never really getting to the root of it.
It's great.
Yeah, but going back to the contraception, I did start taking the pill when I was 16. Yeah, so around the same time that I started taking propranolol, and I was also taking regular antihistamines for my allergies. So that's 3, and then combined with painkillers and the migraine relief.
Okay.
Yeah, and then and also the morning after pill, the emergency contraception. I used that a lot as well in my young teenage years.
Even though you were on the pill?
Yeah.
Why
Just forgetting to take the pill. You know, a lot of instances where I was going out and getting very drunk and being sick, or not knowing if I'd taken it, forgetting. Just like very chaotic teenage years, you know, not taking good care of myself. And when I was in London, because I knew I was pretty crap at taking the pill, and I was living with my ex-boyfriend at the time, I got the implant in my arm. And that was around the same time that I got super ill. And one of the first things I did was I got it taken out. I remember it was just before Christmas, and I was freaking out. You know how it is when you're so desperate, you're in so much pain, you want to do everything you possibly can. And I just wanted this implant out of my arm ASAP. And my doctor couldn't do it. So I remember going to a walk-in clinic, and I waited for hours. I said, I've got these migraines, I need to get this thing out. And they were like, it's probably not the the implant.
Yeah, there was a quote that I put in my blog on the hormonal contraception about how women used to fight to get the birth control, and now they're fighting to get off of it. And I thought, I haven't had that experience because I was only on the pill for 6 months and never did the implant or anything. But I do hear that even from women who are postmenopausal, who are suggesting to their doctor that they want to get off of the hormone replacement therapy, the testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. There is resistance because the doctor is saying, well, that's going to affect your bone density and all these things. And yet there isn't full disclosure and full informed consent when women sign up in the first place. So it really is a process of like you're saying, a process of extracting these things from our body, and to fully step off of that paradigm of all these pharmaceuticals and even all the chemicals. Like when I was pregnant, the process of getting my body off of being infused with chemicals, even though I was a fairly healthy person and like overall pretty holistic, grew up on an intentional community, eating organic food, and was not as fully immersed by any means as a lot of people. It was still this very elaborate process, and it's one that I'm still in on some level, trying to remove the plastics from my food so I'm not being exposed to estrogens. It's just, we are in a whole system, as you know, conundrum of the extent to which this chemical-based consumer culture has really penetrated every aspect of our lives on a cellular level. And I'm just amazed at people like you who, grew up with a lot more assaults to their system, and yet here you are, speaking so clearly and have regained your sense of center in yourself. And it's just, every day in my work, I'm just humbled at like what the human spirit is able to do in terms of reclaiming our
Oh
health and
yeah.
wellness. So how did you
Yeah.
get out of that situation?
Yeah. Well,
You got the implant out.
yeah, I got the implant out, and I mean, that was just the beginning. Looking back now, when I got that implant out, I never could have comprehended what was about to happen to me and my life, and just how bad it would get. I continued to go back to my doctor when the migraines just carried on getting worse and worse, and they weren't going away. I would go back and see my doctor, sometimes multiple times a week. And that's intense, but that's the level of pain I was dealing with, and desperation. And I went to the hospital a few times as well and stayed overnight. But of course, the MRI scans were clear, and they had officially diagnosed me with chronic migraine as a neurological disease, a primary disease, meaning that nothing causes it. And had told me, these are the medications, and, good luck. And I wasn't fully aware of the power of diet and changing the foods we eat. But by coincidence, I had transitioned to a vegan diet just for ethical reasons. But there was this inkling in me that thought, I wonder if being vegan could help, with the migraines. But the thing is, I think veganism can help sometimes because you're just having an abundance of fruits and vegetables. But what I did is I went on like a vegan junk food diet where I had, vegan cookies and muffins and cakes, and like I was a real sugar addict. And I continued to just take painkillers and medications. We tried a bunch of things. I had the nerve block injections in the occipital area, and that made me worse.
It seems like
Yeah.
the vegan was sort of the beginning of you getting more towards plant-based nutrition.
Yeah.
And starting a journey of health, which is awesome because being vegan is a great cleanse. I experienced it myself for about 7 months. But again, it's not a description of what you're eating, since it's a description of what you're not eating. If someone says they're eating vegan, like you just pointed out, it doesn't necessarily mean healthy.
It just tells people what you're not eating. But a lot of vegans get, we fall into the trap of the processed food, the free from section in the supermarket. And I also went gluten-free because I thought maybe that was causing the migraines. And I was at a point of despair because I was thinking, well, I'm not eating meat, dairy, eggs, like all the major allergens I'm not eating. And I just didn't know what was going on. But it's important to bring into the story that I had the really severe tooth infection around this, the time I got really sick. I had the tooth infection. It was an amalgam filling. And I went for an emergency appointment. I was in so much pain. They said the infection was gangrene. It was like, one of the worst they see. I was put on tons of antibiotics, and basically what they do in conventional dentistry with amalgam fillings, they don't believe that they need to, protect you from the mercury. So it just gets drilled into, and, you have your mouth open and fumes and particles, whatever, is like going down your throat and just immediately being exposed to it. And everyone in the room's being exposed to it as well, the dentists. And
it's a hard
profession
to get into, huh?
Yeah. And so I think that was like, would you say the catalyst for me getting super ill? I think my body was already in a really weakened state. because I already felt very ill in my health, and I'd had a few migraines in like the months prior, probably because the infection was building, right?
Yeah.
In the tooth and triggering a few migraines. And then I had root canal, and it was like boom, chronic migraines every day. And I remember the dentist that did my root canal, she was really lovely, and I told her about the migraines, and it's not her fault, you know. She doesn't know. She didn't think, you know, put the two and two together. Or
that's the problem with the medical system, that is there's these specialists, and it's like not seeing the whole picture here, or they don't feel a responsibility towards that. And but we're growing out of that, where I think we're starting to connect the dots a little more. There's more Western medical practitioners that are getting into functional medicine and integrative health and all that. So
no, I do see that shift happening. I also see the resistance to the shift as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially in South Africa. I spent some time there. I saw a few doctors there when I'd had a wisdom tooth removed. And that set off my migraines. Every time I go and have like any dental treatment with anesthetic, I'm triggered massively. And I went to see a doctor there, and you just feel that resistance. Not really seeing the bigger picture, or not thinking that certain things are relevant.
Or if the patient does see the bigger picture and is asking questions about how things are related, there's some condescension around even asking a question, kind of like you're a bad little girl, you know. Like I've had this issue with dentists recently, and I have my first cavity ever, and it just so happens that my first cavity has coincided with me seeing like 3 coaching clients who have strontium and these other obscure metals that are often used even in just the resins and the porcelains, not necessarily, you know, a full-blown mercury amalgam, which I don't think they do anymore. I hope they don't. So I've opted out of doing that for the moment. I'm just taking my time. I found in my healing journey, whenever I rush myself or I feel pressured to do something before I feel, you know, like I've integrated the information, I suffer terrible consequences, you know, which the C-section operation being the prime example of me not being in touch with my core wisdom that everything was fine, and caving into these pressures in a very vulnerable position. And, you know, even the physical situation of sitting back in the dentist chair, you're in this very subservient position, you know. Whenever I go to the dentist, I sit like up on the top part where your legs are supposed to bend over, you know. I don't sit back. And in order to just have the basic discussion with the dentist and make eye contact with them, and, you know, for me, this is basic. It's like, because there has to be consent.
Oh, totally.
And like, imagine if there was a dentist who just completely changed his dental office, where he actually had 2 chairs where you sit opposite the dentist and have a conversation.
And you discuss.
Before being in that
the options. Because, you know, that I love what you just said. And it makes me think about when I did go to that emergency appointment because of the infection. I didn't know what my options were. And the option that wasn't presented to me was, we can pull this tooth out for you now.
Right.
It's really infected. The amalgam filling took up 75% of my tooth. So there wasn't much of my own tooth left at all. That's why it got infected. So I had that amalgam put in when I was 18. And by the time I was 20, it was infected big time. And my diet wasn't good. So I know that contributed to it. But I was never given the option to have it pulled out. And it's ironic because that tooth has been pulled out now and it's missing.
Right.
Because the root canal treatment failed. And it had an abscess on it. And, you know, I think that held me back in my healing journey as well. Because when you've got that low level infection from the root canal, the immune system is constantly trying to fix it. But of course it can't get to the infection because it's encased within the tooth.
Dead tissue in the body is not wise.
But
again,
now I've got another root
they provided
canal.
the alternatives to you, that would not be as
Yeah.
comfortable for them. I mean, I'm not saying
Yes, that's
there's an
true.
ill motive
Yeah.
with every doctor, but I think that there's sort of an unconscious reward process of
Yeah.
getting paid for doing these procedures rather than providing the alternative, which is maybe make no money and just pull the tooth out, you know, or make less. And so, of course, people can't make the best choices for their health if they don't even know what the alternatives are. For example, with the birth control.
Yeah.
If we don't, I mean, people know that natural charting methods exist, but maybe don't know that it's actually extremely effective, and that there's a difference between the rhythm method, where a lot of people have known to get pregnant on it, and it's not effective because it's just an estimate of when you're ovulating, which is different than actually knowing when you're ovulating from actually charting your cycle, you know.
Yeah.
But again, there's the convenience factor, which is that in our culture, we're trained to think that if it's at all inconvenient, as though being healthy and knowing what's going on in your body is inconvenient, then why would anyone bother?
No.
I mean, I had the same attitude when I first heard about like checking your temperature every morning. Like, give me a break. I don't have time to do that, you know, even though it takes like 10 seconds or something.
But it's so rewarding, isn't it? I started out doing the temperature one. And then I switched to an app called, let's see, MyFlow.
Mm-hmm.
It's called MyFlow. And I have the Kaya diaphragm. And so I track my period. I know when I'm ovulating. And when the app tells me I'm ovulating, I feel for my cervix. Mm-hmm. And then I know for sure. Right. Because I can feel the opening. And I never knew that, you know, these things I'm learning in the past year. And I'm discussing them with my close friends. And I made a video that I put on Facebook about how to use the diaphragm and check your cervix. And I just had so many messages like, thank you so much. I didn't know this. And, you know, a lot of women believe, and young girls believe, that you can get pregnant any day. And it's just not true. We can only get pregnant when we're ovulating, and it's a small window.
And the irony is that we think that these hormonal forms of birth control have given us sexual liberation, and yet, you know, where's the liberation in taking something that decreases your sex drive, where you're chemically altering yourself even on days when you're not fertile? It's outrageous. It's amazing to me that, you know, I'm 40 and I'm just barely learning about these methods. I mean, I've always, besides that 6-month period, I've always used natural birth control methods. And then, of course, there was the period when me and my husband were open to getting pregnant. So we didn't, you know, really care if it failed or not, which is a nice place to be in. But now, after having 2 kids, I'm not in that place anymore. So we got to be more aware of all those symptoms. If you're there, you just check. You stay in tune with your body, and it's very empowering. And
and then we can teach our boyfriends or our husbands. We can, you know, I think it's a really beautiful process. When the men get involved. It was actually Andre that told me about the diaphragm. So that's really wonderful. I think, you know, that probably comes from the knowledge from his mum. And he, as part of this MyFlow app, you put your partner's email address in, and they get an update on where you're at in your cycle. So he gets a little message.
Awesome.
And it's lovely, and not enough people know about these things.
Absolutely.
And it's, you know, going back to migraines, it is so relevant to migraines, because I think when we're trying to heal from like any chronic illness, really, not just migraines, the body needs to get back into its own natural rhythm. And, you know, through menstruation, it is I see it as a form of cleansing and detoxifying. And so when you're not having your cycle, perhaps you're limiting, like you're like depriving your body from that extra element of shedding and cleansing and regulating and self-regulating your hormones.
Up to 20 years. Like, I just have a coaching client who contacted me, and she was on the Depo-Provera shot for 10 years, and then the pill for like 3 years, and then the, you know, just on and on. We calculated the total amount of time she has not ovulated is like 20 years. And there are going to be repercussions of that in terms of, your body's ability to compensate for that, or, just reorient itself after getting off of those. So this is an area of work that I really want to be super proactive and vocal about. The importance of women really being aware of what these things are doing to us, and especially on a mineral level. I mean, all the pharmaceuticals, are depleting minerals. And there's a great book by Susie Cohen called Drug Muggers that she breaks down the research on which meds deplete which nutrients. So I've used that a bit in my coaching practice with clients who are on medications, so they can at least know. And that's where the side effects occur, But I want to get back to your story.
Yes, I'm just writing the name of that book down.
Yeah,
Drug Muggers. Yeah.
So you got to the point where you removed the mercury amalgam, but how many did you have total?
4.
4. Okay.
When I had the root canal, I had a crown put on that was also made of mercury.
Okay. So was that
even though I had
pieces of mercury in your mouth, or?
Still 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So even though I had, the first mercury filling removed and the root canal, it was just replaced with another piece of mercury, which was the crown. Okay. And this was all because I couldn't afford anything else. So that was the band which I fall into because I was a student.
Yeah. And now you've become a student of mercury detox.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The last mercury filling removed recently, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just about a week ago. Yeah. I've had some pretty tough migraines recently. I've been backwards and forwards from the dentist with another root canal, and then removing this last filling. So it's been quite a lot of strain on my jaw, and with the injections, with the anesthetic that triggers a migraine.
Antibiotics as well, or not?
Nope, I've managed to escape that this time. I've been okay. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, it feels good to have a mouth free of mercury.
Imagine.
I don't have a body free of mercury yet, but I feel like I'm not too far away from reaching that point of going deeper into the detox. Yeah.
You're not just detoxing while it's being leached into your body. That must be a big relief to know that you're actually going to be able to get some footing and make more headway. So is there any part of the story that we want to explore before we move on to what you've been doing to get rid of the mercury and all of the detox symptoms and the protocols that you've been doing in the mineral balancing? Like I thought one thing that we discussed possibly going over is the feeling of suicide and the suicidal feelings that you had at a certain point, which we thought it'd be good to share just out in the open, that this is a normal thing when you're in excruciating pain. And we want to talk about it because we want to take away the stigma. I have had so many coaching clients share with me that they feel suicidal, and it doesn't mean that these people don't love life. It's that they're,
that's the big misconception.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I feel like my perception, I want to hear yours in a second, is that it's actually that migraine prevents you from being able to engage in your life in the way that you want to. And so there's a crisis of self when you are not capable of functioning on really basic levels. And then of course there's the actual physical sensation of the pain, which is excruciating and is like being in a torture chamber, especially when it becomes chronic, living through day after day after day of torture, and year after year, decade after decade for some people. I think it's a very natural, normal feeling to need a break and an alleviation from that pain. And also it's not an expression of a lack of love for life, but more the tension and sadness that comes from wanting so much to engage in life and not being able to physically.
You said it so well. Yeah. It's something that I've become more and more comfortable talking about. But there was a period in my life when I didn't know how to talk about it, and it was very hidden. And Yeah, I think there's so many things, there's so many contributing factors into the suicidal depression. And something interesting I noticed, not only did I feel suicidal during the attacks that were, the migraine attacks that were, I call them like 10 out of 10, which just means it doesn't get any worse. Not only did I feel suicidal during the pain, but sometimes the day after, when the pain had calmed down a bit, or even on days where I just had like a low level headache, I would still find myself feeling suicidal and feeling extremely depressed. And I think that is because it's not like we can just switch on and off like our mood, when you've been suffering with pain for so long, and when your body is just so tired and like beaten down, I think, yeah, depression can become a really big issue. But for me, it's turned into I love the idea of post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was diagnosed with PTSD and I identified with that for so long. And now I identify with post-traumatic growth.
Right. Well, and then this idea that everything is a disorder, right? So there's also the idea of post-traumatic growth being, it's a reordering. That actually when you experience trauma, the nervous system naturally reorders itself to be able to survive in a situation that's dangerous. So it's actually not a maladaption at all. It's just a reorganized response to that. But then you can grow out of it too. So, the painful chrysalis and growth process. But
I had a lot of help.
You have a what?
I had a lot of help to grow. Like I read tons of books and like self-help books, and I've seen a lot recently on social media, people saying, if you've got depression and anxiety, self-help books are basically not that great, and it's insulting to recommend a book to someone that's suicidal. Well, I had a very different experience because there was one book in particular called The Power of Now, and I got it on audio, Eckhart Tolle, and I listened to that, and it really started to change the way that I experienced what I was going through. Speaking with my psychotherapist as well, I have a really great relationship with my psychotherapist, and I've known her now. I've been in therapy with her now for about 4 years, and we do Skype. I used to see her in person in London, but now I'm back home, which is a bit further away from London. I do Skype with her, and it just helps. I think having that support there, to just talk openly and freely about how you're feeling, because sometimes just say out loud, I don't want to be in my body right now, I'm scared, I'm in too much pain, I don't know how I can go on. Just to say that out loud to a therapist who's not going to judge you and who just wants the best for you and wants to help you explore your feelings, I think that's, for me, it has been one of the most helpful things. Sharing it with family and friends is also really important, but family and friends always want to fix it. And obviously it makes them very upset to know that someone they love doesn't want to, be alive anymore, or goes through all these really tough things. Sometimes it can overcomplicate it with your family and friends because, well, for one, they're not trained therapists. So, it's like, I'm kind of recommending that people, reach out to a therapist in those situations, or, but I mean, the thing that's helped me move forward so much has been, if I look back to when I was really depressed and really suicidal, it was because I thought I was going to be stuck this way forever.
Yeah.
So I lost a bit of hope. Yeah. And I think that can be the most challenging thing. Now, when I have a 10 out of 10 migraine, which I just had one the other week, that was really bad. Even though I'm healing and I'm detoxing, I still get them as bad as they ever were. You know, when they come, they're still really bad. And so that can be challenging because it sometimes makes me feel like, you know, all these doubts come in. Is it working? Am I healing? Am I getting worse? Am I doing the right thing? But, you know, just coming back to like mindfulness and breathing and reminding myself that I am getting better, and also looking at all my other symptoms, like random other symptoms that have now gone away and got better. That lets me know that my body is healing. And so that helps
when you're actually having the migraine to keep that big picture view. But when you are able to do it, it's like, it is very important to remember just how bad it has been and how far you've come. Because when you're in the midst of that pain, like you're saying, if it's at the same level it was years ago in terms of the intensity at that moment,
scary.
You feel like you're just stuck in the same place, and those hopeless feelings come up. And I also notice that there's a lot of gut issues, bloating, and just imbalances during an actual migraine. And I think that all the histamine from those bacteria, when there's digestive issues, so I know it always correlates to a bad mood for me, even on a subtle level if I ever feel that stuff, you know. And so it's I think the hope part of it is a big piece because, well, for one thing, I noticed that some people are resistant, at least in forums I've seen. Some people with migraines are very resistant to even any new idea of hope because they've got their hopes up and then tried something out and it didn't work. And so they're afraid to hope again. And so they end up doing things like, well, they get very angry because there's no solution, and starting to believe that migraine is just genetic and that it's this fatalistic thing. And when people have reached that point, it's very difficult for them to heal because they've kind of closed off their options because they're afraid to get disappointed again in something not working.
Yeah.
And the healing process, I think in a way that our pharmaceutical culture sets us up for that too, because the pharmaceutical consumerist culture is just sort of like, you know, these high-tech solutions that aren't really solutions because they're just suppressing things. And it creates this culture of people expecting these immediate results from these pills. And then people transfer that kind of psychology over to working with natural methods. And then they have these standards of doing things like taking natural supplements that they are almost a demand that it work in the same way as a pharmaceutical. And it doesn't work that way because when you're using a natural method, you're actually healing. You're in a healing process. It's a process. So I find that to be with coaching people is like helping them to recognize psychologically you have to approach it different because the process is different because what we're doing is different. We're not suppressing. We're actually getting to the root cause, which involves a lot of cleaning out and clearing out. And you mentioned that in your notes to me that you know, just the work of clearing out the detoxification pathways and just cleaning out the gut of all these pharmaceuticals and bad lifestyle habits is you know, part of the work there. And it's a catch-22. It's something that's difficult to coach people on because there has to be a certain level of willingness to go through an exacerbation of symptoms. And the issue is toxicity. That's not always the case because there are cases where it's a deficiency issue. And of course, toxicities and deficiencies can exist side by side because a higher level of one mineral is going to lead to a depletion in another because of their dynamic relationship. But some people have more cleaning out and detoxing to do than others. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if someone wants to heal their migraines, they have to go through the fire and brimstone and the dark night of the soul in order to get to the other side. But for some people, that is the process. And they need to be aware of that. And so that's mostly what I want to talk to you about today is how do you approach that? Because it's not linear, and it is this catch-22 because you're trying to get better, but you have to feel shittier in order to feel better. And so how do you modulate? How do you of course there's no formula, but how do you approach how deep to go with the detoxing and how do you know when to step back and give your gentleness and a bit of a break?
So when I look back to when we first started the mineral rebalancing, that was about 5 months ago. my migraines like got worse. Things were getting worse. And I was really scared. But we knew, when I say we, I'm referring to my partner and to you as well, because of our communication. But yeah, Andre would say to me, look, we know what's happening. Your body is beginning to detox straight away. And if things are getting worse, it's probably a good sign that your body's got a lot of clearing out to do. And then when I started doing the coffee enemas, when I bought that in, that was really supportive. I think that just started to help my body to, especially the liver, it lessened the the load, the toxic load, and I found immediate relief. And I started drinking quite a lot of fresh vegetable juices, and I went 100% organic. I had this feeling, like a realization that for me, taking the minerals alone, I felt it wasn't going to be quite enough, and that I wanted to do more to help my body to detox. And why not switch to organic if you can afford it? I mean, we can only just about afford it, but we feel like it's worth it. And why not do these coffee enemas to help the liver that's been suffering and bombarded for so long? I never considered my liver.
I think people just have an initial hurdle with doing something like that. And once you're doing it, you realize it's not really that big of a deal, especially once you start feeling the benefit. But yeah, people are, again, they're just looking for the pill solution, which would be the mineral. And if people do like a short coaching process, we don't usually end up getting into things like coffee enemas. But yeah, I had a process of dealing with parasites, which maybe we can talk about after this, where I was just, in the bathroom. Like a lot of my life was in the bathroom doing enemas, and it was like, wow, this is where I have ended up, huh? This is not the picture I had for my life. But so you did additional things on top of the mineral balancing. So just to give a quick recap, so that you were doing zinc. Your hair tissue mineral analysis results showed high mercury and very high calcium. And high calcium is a marker for potential hidden copper toxicity. And I had initially suggested trying copper to see how you feel on it, but you had so many symptoms at the time that we couldn't really tell whether the copper was exacerbating things or not. So we decided that you would go off the copper, because if it was hidden copper toxicity, just focusing on the zinc would help to pull out the copper, with the hopes that we would see on a retest whether you have a copper dump or not. And so you were basically doing like selenium and zinc and chromium, and for a while you were doing the chicken liver for the vitamin A to make the copper available. And most people go on and off chicken liver, myself as well. Very few people stay consistent with it. And that's what the healing process is like, right? You go through trying many different things. So you decided to, on top of the mineral support, with the zinc pulling the mercury out and potentially pulling the copper out, to supplement with, basically do a modified version of the Gerson protocol, which involved more carrot juicing than what I was already suggesting, and then iodine. And can you just give a quick overview before we go deeper into the detox as to what the Gerson protocol?
So the Gerson therapy, for me, it added in the addition of CoQ enzyme 10. They're also big advocates of niacin, which you'd already recommended. And instead of taking the niacin in large doses to abort a migraine, I now take it 3 times a day with my meals and just have smaller doses. And then more recently, I've added in the addition of B12, but I'm not sure about it. I think I'm going to stop taking it for a week and see how I am, because my migraines have been pretty bad again recently. I guess it's like a given with detox. But so what else did we add in? Iodine. The Gerson therapy made me take my digestive enzymes a bit more seriously, and be very consistent with that to help my digestion. And then the addition of a lot of juices, fresh cold pressed at home multiple times throughout the day. Carrot and apple, or just straight up carrot, or a green juice. And
mineral balancing. I mean, that there's a lot of minerals in juices.
Yeah.
The best place to get them, actually, because there's all the, enzymes that go into them, and just that life force and vitality from a living plant.
And the first few weeks on the Gerson therapy was amazing. As soon as I started doing those coffee enemas and having the extra juices, that first week, I only had one migraine. Whereas prior to that first week, I'd had a migraine every single day.
Yeah.
So during my first month of Gerson therapy, I didn't actually have chronic migraines anymore because it was less than 15 migraines in that month. Now we're edging more towards chronic again. But I am...
You're doing chelation, or you were?
I was. Yeah. I'd started doing some chelation and doing some parasite work.
So
had a bit of stress as well.
The chelation you're doing is more chlorella and is that right?
It was spirulina, and the Hawaiian spirulina, which is thought to be stronger, and barley wheatgrass juice powder. So it's the very dark wheatgrass powder. And I was just having a lot of cilantro on all of my salads and my curries and things every day. And that's, cilantro is thought to be a chelator, and seaweed, things like doles.
And in your email to me, you were saying that you felt that the chelation and these metal detox smoothies and stuff like that, the medical medium suggests that they're a little bit too intense, that maybe the Gerson, just when you were doing the minerals and the Gerson protocol, that was more supportive and more like a gentle detox than the chelation.
Yeah. And I think the reason for that, another thing I'm doing, I'm focusing more on binders. So with Mercury Detox, for anyone listening that really doesn't know, much about it or where to begin, when you're detoxing heavy metals, there's two things that are really important. It's your binders and your chelators. And the binders are the things like clay and charcoal and fiber that you mix the clay with, that basically go through your digestive tract, and they sweep up the mess that's currently there. So because when we're mercury toxic, our detox pathways become clogged and not working very efficiently, so the colon and the liver just get really congested. And I think it's really important to pathways in the colon to assist them before you start like going into chelation, because chelation is, I think of it as it's going to start pulling the heavy metals if they're lodged in my brain, which could explain why I have the migraines so badly. The chelation will start to go in and like pull it out, and then it's going to go then to the bloodstream and then to the colon. And if the colon is all backed up and still toxic in there and like has leaky gut, then the chelation is going to basically add fuel to the fire and start making things worse. And I think I've experienced a bit of that. I think I've experienced the chelation making things worse. And there was a period of time, I think it was 2 years ago, or no, I forget, maybe a year ago, but I was spending the summer in Antwerp, and I was doing the heavy metal detox smoothie every single day. And I was so ill. Like I was probably, one of the worst periods of time for me, because I was chelating and I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't taking binders. I wasn't doing the enemas.
Yeah. So you're suggesting to people, if they wanted to try this, to do all three together as mutually supportive practices.
Yeah.
I also want to add a little thing about the fiber, because it's the pectin is one form of fiber that's often used as a binder besides the clay. Can you hear me?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like there's a little glitchiness going on. That the prebiotic, the potato starch and the acacia fiber that I recommend in my
Yeah.
protocol, that they can not only bind onto heavy metals, but actually bind onto bacteria. And when you get that bloated feeling and there's an overabundance of certain types of bacteria, some of these bacteria produce histamine and glutamate, so they're adding to that histamine glutamate load. And the prebiotic fibers and starches can come in and actually help bind onto those bacteria as well, and help flush it
Yeah.
out of your system so that your liver doesn't have to process all the byproducts of that. So
I think that's super important when you're in a really sick state. I think it's probably one of the most important things you can do, as well as the mineral rebalancing. It's to be taking binders every day. So I just recently started making this binder tea. It's just like a little concoction that I came up with, because when you mix clay and fiber in with water, just cold water, it's just not very enjoyable. It's like drinking sand. and,
yeah.
and I thought, how can I make this a bit more fun and a bit more of a ritual, so I can actually stick to it. So I take bentonite clay, so I have a tablespoon of bentonite clay, a tablespoon of ground up flaxseed,
Mm-hmm.
and a tablespoon of an inulin powder. I think it's a chicory root.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and I do like half cold water, half hot water, and I put it in a blender, and I put some sweetener in there as well, a bit of honey, or at night time I put is it glycine, the one that is meant to calm like
Yeah.
anxiety in the brain.
Yep.
Yeah, so I add in some glycine at night time, and I mix it up, blend it, and it's like a milky, warm. It's really, yeah, I like it, and that's working really well. I do that morning and night, to just absorb all those toxins and probably mercury. That's
Yeah, because otherwise you're just kind of stirring the pot, right? I mean,
yeah,
if your kidneys
because
are well,
the minerals chelate,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, zinc does basically they displace each other. So depending on their valence and where they are on the table of the elements, the body will actually even sometimes use heavy metals if it doesn't have other minerals that it needs as the next best thing for those enzyme processes. And then of course that enzymatic process is not as efficient and not as effective. But when you start taking the minerals that your body was lacking, your body is like, oh, that's what I've been wanting. And it will take that mineral. And then in that process, the receptor sites will let go of the heavy metal or the, whatever the next best thing was that the body was using. So minerals displace each other all the time. So you could think of it as chelation in that way. And zinc triggers and activates 25 different enzymes called metalloenzymes, and different versions of those metalloenzymes are responsible for detoxing different metals. And so they don't detox all metals. There are certain metals that are not detoxed through zinc. But in my coaching practice, I pretty much, since I'm not an expert in heavy metal detox, I just mostly focus on supporting people with the right dose of zinc and selenium, because if sometimes people end up being suggested to take quite a bit of zinc, like especially women with hormonal issues, are suggested to take upwards of like 30 milligrams of zinc. And I've observed myself very closely doing different experiments on different levels of zinc and copper ratios. And I can very, very definitively say that when I have too much zinc in relation to copper, all kinds of things start happening. Like my moons disappear, my teeth are more brittle. So zinc reduces calcium, which is one reason why it's so good for people like you who have a lot of calcium. But if you have very low calcium like myself and you take large amounts of zinc and it lowers your copper and your calcium, your bone density and integrity starts to get compromised. Your hair can go grayer because copper is really needed for strong hair. So there's a lot of different little details that I've been able to confirm and notice over, based off of the research and over the course of 6 months of observing different experiments on myself. And it's really crucial to have that balance. So yeah, that's why I was suggesting in your case, since we did not see a spike of copper with the zinc pulling out, perhaps all of your symptoms were simply from the mercury, and you might be needing some copper soon. But that's the thing about the healing process, is that it's not like the hair tissue mineral analysis and what we objectively know from the science about these mineral dynamics are just a basic framework that we then use to then do experiments. And people need to be willing to do some level of testing and experimentation in order to determine what works for their body and what's actually going on. Because if you have copper toxicity and you take copper and you don't feel, or you think you have copper toxicity and you take copper and you feel totally fine on it, that is valuable information that can help us know more definitively what's actually happening instead of just relying just on the tests. So
I'm going to try out some copper soon.
Yeah. Well, and you're getting it in the chlorella and in some of the other things you were taking that have copper in it. And your sesame seed tahini has copper in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did feel when I first started experimenting with zinc, before I had even studied hair tissue mineral analysis, I would think I was taking maybe about 20 milligrams a day, and I felt very distinctly, what I believed to be were probably metals in my brain moving around. And it was like, I would get a very acute migraine for like 30 seconds. And I would think, oh my God, I just got this sudden migraine and it's going to be this full blown thing. And then it would just like instantaneously disappear in a split second again.
I've had those as well.
Yeah. It was like, it was some process of moving and pulling things out. And redistributing. So again, that's why the binders are so valuable, because you don't want to just pick stuff up and move it, to the next spot.
That makes me think of tinnitus.
Yeah.
The ringing in my ears, because that's got a lot worse since detoxing. It's calmed down a bit over the last few days, but a few weeks ago, the tinnitus and my anxiety, because I've been having panic attacks throughout this whole detox process. I've had the worst anxiety of my life, but once it's over, it's over. And I'm like, what was that? Yeah. I can't even make sense of it, but I think it's pharmaceutical drugs being released from the liver. I mean, I've just taken so many things over the years that are probably making their way out of me now, and they're stirring the pot. And when I was on pharmaceuticals, I had like manic episodes, hallucinations at nighttime, like really, really vivid night terrors and hallucinations. And as I've been detoxing, those things have been popping up again. So I feel it's all of that leaving my body. But going back to the tinnitus, yeah.
Oh, well,
do you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say that, yes, I had tinnitus as well. And I know the antibiotics are, some of them, not all of them, there's different kinds of antibiotics, but some of them are high in aluminum. And there have been studies showing that these build up in the inner ear. And I'm sure probably other pharmaceuticals do too, especially if your lymph is compromised in your neck and head area, which we know people with migraine are compromised in that way. And it's really important that the lymph is moving, especially in the brain, because the brain has a whole lymphatic system that they just discovered like 2 years ago. And it removes 3 pounds of waste a year, the equivalent of the weight of your brain per year. So if that's not working well, your ears are going to be swollen and not draining, and your brain is going to be building up with all those things. So when you take zinc, I experienced that as well, where I had always had some like achiness in my ear, and not full blown tinnitus, but maybe a little tinnitus here and there that would crop up. And then when I took the zinc, it flared up as that stuff was moving out, and now I don't get it at all. So see, when you get enough of a contrast and you dive into this detox work for long enough, you start to actually get a real sense for what's going on, so that you don't freak out when you get certain symptoms, and you actually, know that it's just on its way out. And
I find
too, one more detail is that I used to have a lot of heat in my ears when I had migraines, and when I started to take the zinc, I actually felt a cold sensation. So it's interesting, even from the perspective of like Chinese medicine and the different qualities and properties of different sensations of the hot and the cold and the damp and the dry, that in that healing process of my ears and the tinnitus, that the zinc actually created like a cold sensation, which I've also felt in my liver as well when taking zinc. So
Wow.
yeah, there's just, all these little symptoms and details that when you detox for long enough and you go on the healing process long enough, you start to get very familiar with what they mean and what your body is saying to you. So it becomes less confusing over time.
That's made me want to talk about something specific, because when we're detoxing, I think we do need a lot of downtime, and we need rest and like deep restoration, because the body needs that in order to heal. And for me, it has been a massive challenge to prioritize that time to rest, because I always feel pressure to carry on with other things in my life, projects, work. And I think it's important to remember that, yes, it's kind of annoying to take loads of time off work and to just rest and do nothing, but you're not actually doing nothing. Like, your whole body is detoxing and rebuilding itself. And I think it's worth it, if you can, to take that time off work to do the rest that you need, and then regain your health, and then go back out there in the world slowly and build yourself back up and like ease back into work.
It's almost like
we're
detoxing from some cultural programming around this drive that we just have to always be so hard on ourselves. And this is really a characteristic that a lot of people with migraines have. So yeah, that's part of the emotional, spiritual detoxification that takes place as we learn to give ourselves permission to rest more and be gentle with ourselves.
Yeah. And I feel like I've really stepped into that recently, and it helps. But I do still have feelings of guilt, and I think, oh, what do my friends and family and think of me? It looks like I'm just lying still and doing nothing, but there's big work going on. Still a lot of symptoms and pain. And
sometimes with migraines, I felt, again, there's that guilt thing where, because like if I was lying in bed with a migraine, it appeared to my husband that I was just lying in bed, which looks other people associate that with rest, but if you're being tortured with a migraine, you're not actually resting. And so after the migraine, then I would need to rest. And he's like, but you've been in bed for like a full day, and so yeah, it's just difficult, I think, for partners to either trying to understand and be supportive, but it's very difficult if you're generally healthy to have any frame of reference for like what that's like. So I would, at moments wish that he were more compassionate and understanding, and wish that I didn't feel like I had to justify and explain so much. But I also needed to be compassionate and understanding just for the fact that he can't really relate.
Yeah, I've been going through that as well, those realizations. And I think open and honest communication with your partner or your loved ones, whoever you're living with or spending most of your time with during chronic illness. It's these things are really difficult to talk about, but I think honest communication is always, it will help you move forward. And like you said, having compassion for them as well, because I think sometimes when we're in so much pain, we don't mean to do it, but we can become selfish or a bit self-absorbed or self-obsessed, because we're trying so hard to just heal and get well and get our lives back, and the pain is like all consuming. But it's like important to be grateful for those people around you that support you, and just to understand that they too are having their own painful emotional experience, because they don't want to see you sick, and like it affects them as well. And it's like the ripple effect. And
and if you have kids, and even more complicated.
You have kids,
because if I'm out of commission, which luckily I'm not anymore, but back in the day, it was like, my little son, he experienced watching me be debilitated and puking my guts out so much. And my husband would help me out with my migraines by taking my son, but it didn't leave a lot of extra energy for him to actually take care of me, And there were times where I was like, why don't you teach him how to take care of me? Like, teach our son how to offer water, how to give a neck rub, or, because, I want to be critical of him, but it was like, that's great that I don't have to take care of a child right now, but I kind of need a little something sometimes. Physical touch is just so important to help with the feeling of
It
isolation.
is.
I really think that, like you were saying in your email to me, that some of these solutions are so simple. And in terms of nurturing one another, I don't even need my partner to understand what I'm going through verbally always, although women do process emotions more verbally than men. But just physical contact, because it feels so isolating at times, that just to be held. And that's what's interesting about this healing journey. That's why my old brand was called Simply Well. It's because it was like a revelation for me to realize that these health issues are seemingly so complex. And yet there's these very, very simple solutions that are available, like potato starch, like touch, like sleep, that it's really a call to come back into relationship with the basic rhythms of nature and of life. And so it's a beautiful invitation. I mean, it is a blessing in that way. I'm not sure why as a soul that was my way of coming to these realizations, but if that is what my soul's journey has been, and that's where it's helped me to arrive, I can be grateful for it, because our modern culture is really getting very out of sync with the basic nourishing rhythms and cycles that keep all life alive. So it's good.
That's such an interesting topic. Yeah. And what I found is when I was on all the medications way back when, I found it really hard to get in touch with nature and like you say, the rhythms, because I didn't have a routine. I wasn't waking up early in the morning. I wasn't going to bed at a reasonable time when I was on all the meds. I was just chaotic all the time. But now my body is clear of medication. I'm starting to wake up in the morning without an alarm clock and go out and sit in the garden and look up at the sun first thing in the morning. And like it hurts my eyes, especially if I have a headache. But I'm trying to teach my body, train my body. This is how things are going to be from now on. This is how I want my body to behave and the way we're going to move forward. You do have to train your body.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But the amazing thing is that it's so natural. All these things are so natural to your body that you'll just slip straight back. You'll slip into it. You'll ease into it. And, not being on your phone late at night, because that, exasperates headaches. Using evening time to have dim light and relaxing music, essential oils, yoga, meditation, an enema before bed. And
there's so many tools, but really, I feel that the technology, even though it's this amazing gift, is also, there's a certain frequency of speed that's kind of integral to healing. So especially with the Wi-Fi, like we have our whole house is hardwired right now. I'm not on Wi-Fi. And for me, that makes a big difference. I've thought about in the past that it could be that people with a lot of metals in their system are actually vibrating. They're almost like antennas. That could explain some of the reason why some people are more electrosensitive than others. If you don't have the zinc to move the metals out, and there's all these frequencies going around, you're kind of vibrating like an antenna. So getting tuning into more slower frequencies, like the Schumann frequencies that the earth gives off, which are extremely low frequency, but they're coherent, they're grounding. And that is sort of the counterbalance to this speed of modern life. And that is what the body requires to heal it. The ability to slow down. It's not just all about taking more tests or taking more supplements or going to see more practitioners. And so
at some point, sorry to jump in, but I was going to say at some point, all of that searching for your answer and relying on other people and doctors, it has to come to an end.
Yeah.
Like totally. You have to just be with yourself.
People are becoming their own doctors, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens.
100%.
That's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain characteristics of the healing process that I think it's really valuable to make explicit. And that's kind of like what I feel is my job, is just sort of like sharing what I've learned about what this process is like, so people have some kind of orientation point of what is going on through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And one basic observation is that pharmaceutical medications suppress and they drive the pathology deeper into the body. And the healing process is the opposite. It's the process of things coming from deep inside and moving their way out and loosening out. And so yeah, it's a different process. That's why it's a good sign if these things are arising and coming up and out. So you've done a lot of detoxing, and it's been a little bit past an hour. Not that we have to rush, but I do want to start to wrap things up. And with your HTMA results, your calcium has gone down and your mercury has gone down, and you've gone through periods of not having chronic migraines, and you're starting to be able to identify what practices that you do are conducive to that with the carrot juicing and the enemas and the binders, and which practices cause the migraines to rear their head again, especially if you're doing a deeper detox with chelation. And we're hoping that, if you do another retest, that your mercury levels will be even lower, especially since your amalgam is out now and you've got this amazing healing clay tea and you have all these resources. And so it seems to me like you're just on this beautiful journey of continued well-being, and you really do have a framework for what is going on with different approaches, and you can use different tools and approaches in a way that suits you best. So I'm excited to see what your next PMA, results are.
Me too. There's one thing that I just thought of. It's important to mention. I think my immune system is functioning a lot better now because the allergies that I was experiencing have diminished massively.
Yeah.
So the itchy throat that used to keep me up at night constantly, and the itchy nose and puffy eyes, all that stuff is fading away. And to me, that says my immune system is starting to, wake back up. It's got what it needs, and that's just an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and I think that's why we have to keep the big picture view in a holistic view. That's very important. Just because the migraines come back when you do chelation doesn't mean that you haven't made any headway, because the fact that your body is not struggling that much and those other symptoms are diminishing shows that the whole is more resilient, and that things are clearing out, so that's maybe a little niggling thing with migraine, but I mean, living with an itchy throat for years and then having to take antihistamines is,
and now I don't take them. I never thought, when my throat was so itchy that I couldn't sleep and I was crying and almost having panic with it because it was so bad, I would think, how is this ever going to go away? I don't think how will this symptom that is so severe, it feels like it's going to be with me forever. And it went. And without me even doing any mental work around it, without me even believing that it would go, it went.
That's the real sign. When those things that you weren't even explicitly trying to work on, even though they annoyed you, disappear. And you're like, okay, that was a shift right there.
Yeah. And so that tells me, about the migraines as well. If I ever, still think sometimes, oh, what if I have these migraines forever? What if they'll always keep coming back? And I'll think, well, my itchy throat went away, and my heart palpitations aren't chronic anymore. So, the migraines are the most historic, one of the most historic symptoms I have. So I think they might be the last thing to go. I've heard that with other people's stories as well.
And also it's valuable to keep in mind when we're keeping a holistic view of the actual healing process, that we may want one symptom to go away first because it's the most niggling. But again, the symptom that's the most painful is probably the most chronic and probably the most deep-seated. And that if the body has had deficiencies for years, it is determining the sequence, and it knows the most intelligent sequence. So it may be like, oh, I've been wanting zinc forever, or I've been wanting copper forever. Now I'm going to heal this connective tissue over here, or do this or that or the other first. And we can't direct, and it knows what it's doing. We can't direct which symptom it's going to take care of first. We just have to stay really persistent and consistent and hopeful, and eventually, but it's a long-term process. I mean, I still have brain fog and subtler iterations of what I know to be a migraine pattern, just because it doesn't manifest in such an extreme, painful, intense way doesn't mean that, I can say I don't get migraines anymore, but I am so in tune with my symptoms that if I do something like I would say the last thing I'm very careful about in terms of diet is staying away from cayenne or spicy chili around my moon time, I can eat it at other times, but if I eat that around my moon time, I can feel the beginning of some bloating and mild brain fog and headache, and that would have been a migraine earlier. And so it's still the same pattern. So it takes a very long time to completely get rid of the entire pattern. But yeah, I mean, my life is completely different. Like it just doesn't escalate. And so part of the healing process I've found is kind of dismantling the emotional dread around the beginning of symptoms that used to turn into something else, and like reaching a place of realizing that, oh, I used to be afraid that this thing was going to get me, and actually it's not. And I can just relax around it and know that this is just a little bit of brain fog that's going to go away on its own, and I don't even have to do anything about it, you know? And so
I always say now, it's going to pass. I always say it. And I think it's important to start, saying it and believing it. Yeah. When my head is bad and, I'm saying to my mum or Andre, it's really bad, I'll always finish it with, but, I'll be okay by this afternoon or by later this evening. I know that it's going to calm down and I know it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, you have an incredibly healthy, like, mental attitude towards it. And I know there might be times when it's more depressing, and that's part of being authentic.
Yeah.
And that's a very healthy thing, to be authentic with our actual feelings and what we're experiencing. I'm not trying to say that like the goal is that we always have this gung-ho attitude all the time. But
no, overall, sometimes I don't.
But I can tell when I'm coaching people, there are some people where I can just see that like they have the mental fortitude to be able to grapple with the situation and see the big picture, and even make statements like you made in your email to me about how this has been a blessing for you. So maybe we could end on a little bit more of the spiritual notes of how it is a blessing. How could something so painful and excruciating actually be a blessing? And what is your spiritual process around this work been like?
Yeah. So the person I was before the migraines became chronic, let's just say I'm not trying to get back to be that person. I'm the new person. I'm moving forward and I'm a completely different person. People often say when they're experiencing ill health, they want their old life back and they want the old them back and they want to regain their health. I'm not regaining my health. I'm building a new health. Do you see how I'm doing this? Like going backwards and forwards, because that's how it feels. It's like that was the old me and all that crazy stuff that happened, and it was all supposed to happen and it taught me so much, and now I'm moving forward and I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I even said that when my migraines were really chronic, I could still say at times I'm the happiest I've ever been. I don't want my old life back, because I think being so ill made me like I had to get in touch with my inner self, and I had to learn how to breathe properly and breathe with my tummy, and I had to really feel what it was like to be in my body. And I started yoga because of spending so much time in bed. I had sciatica, my whole body from head to toe, like chronic muscle pains and stiffness. I felt like an old lady at times. So I knew that yoga was going to be good for me. And yoga has humbled me and made me a lot more loving and soft and grateful. And through the detox process, there's a lot of crying and letting go of old traumas. And I think, it's quite common that people who develop chronic illness, I mean, not all the time, but they usually have some kind of history with emotional trauma or physical trauma. And I mean, there's studies that say that childhood adversity, your chances of developing chronic disease are higher. And I think it's because the stress, the chronic ongoing stress, weakens the immune system, and therefore we are then more susceptible to mercury poisoning. Because I think some people can have mercury in their body Actually, I saw it just recently. I know I'm going off topic from spirituality, but this is so important that there was someone recently on YouTube and they had a mercury test done and they had super high levels, but they weren't ill.
Right.
And that it all depends on like the condition of the body and what your mineral levels are like and stuff. But going back to spirituality, I had to learn a lot about boundaries. When you're in so much pain for so long, your life can just begin to feel really chaotic. And certain friends or even family members that before your chronic illness you could cope with, you can no longer cope with their energy and with the toxic relationships that you have, because you're on toxic overload. So I think chronic illness forces you, well, it can if you let it force you to, and you allow that process to take place, to put boundaries in place, to end friendships that you no longer feel happy in, to even end romantic relationships, to improve your relationships with family members. So chronic illness for me has been the catalyst to change my whole entire life, and it has changed everything. It's also changed my career path as well, and now training to be a health coach, and to do something similar to what you're doing. And I would love to coach people in fostering a spiritual practice, because I think it can sometimes, things like yoga and meditation and qigong, it can look, I've heard plenty of friends and family say, oh, that's not for me. Like, I'm way too stressed out to do anything like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, the more stressed you are, the more important it is that you learn to do something. I mean, even like walking barefoot on the grass and grounding yourself and being out in nature, looking up at the moon. I've had times where I've been in an awful migraine and I go to the bathroom and I don't turn the light on because I'm too light sensitive. And I look out the window and I can see the full moon, and it just fills me with joy. And I never would notice those things prior chronic illness. I wasn't noticing things in nature. And now, everything is a blessing. Everything is beautiful. And I mean, I think that pretty much sums it up. But it's chronic illness and the migraines specifically, they've like just encouraged me to improve all aspects of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of my healing process recently has been healing myself of any idea of the way anything is supposed to be, because so much of my intention in my life has come from some kind of cultural story that things were supposed to be different. Things were supposed to be this way. I never imagined that my life was going to be, have chronic migraines. It's like that. Those are things we usually think happen to other people, not yourself.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Grapple with and come to terms with, this is actually what my life has become. I think for me, part of me recognizing my wholeness is recognizing that wholeness isn't this state of feeling good all the time. Wholeness is the capacity to integrate experience, including all of the unpleasant experiences, and to be able to radically accept that my life contains pain sometimes, or I went through this 5-year period of chronic pain and suffering that completely reorganized my life in a direction that I think was better, but it was not expected or wasn't the trajectory of what my mind thought it should be. It's actually much better than whatever program I was following thinking it should be. But there's something about chronic illness that's like it is a identity crisis, really.
But it's an identity
crisis that allows us to actually get in touch with our authentic self. Because the identity crisis is around the extent to which we've been kind of wearing a false identity that never really was us in the first place. So it's a really awesome process of becoming more authentic and integrating experience and being able to accept the totality of oneself, and in order to move forward. So,
because you had your migraines go chronic right after the birth of your son. And with me, it was moving to London and starting my first year at university.
Yeah.
I mean, very different experiences, but sometimes, yeah, I think life just, it screws you over at the points where, you know, they're the most testing.
Well, it was an initiation for me into motherhood.
Yeah.
And that's one reason it was so painful.
Yeah.
I felt I failed at my initiation, but you were being initiated into your adult life.
My adulthood. Yeah. And at one point, I think, it must have been a good few months before I got in touch with you, but I had completely shaved all my hair off. And I just decided to do that because that was a very spiritual and humbling experience for me. I was losing, my hair was like thinning a lot, and the apartment was just full of hair because of all of the meds that I'd been on and probably the stress. Right. And I thought it was I can't think of the word, but anyway, it was the hair was the old me.
Right.
I mean, it's extreme. I mean, most people wouldn't do something like this, but the hair was the old me. It was a metaphor. That was the word I was looking for.
It was a symbolic ritual that you...
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you said it right. Yeah. And that really helped me just to carve out this new life and this new identity that I am bold and I am brave and I can do this and I'm willing to be uncomfortable. And that just, it helped me. I'm not saying everyone should go and shave their hair, but I am saying that I would encourage people to really engage with their own transformation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, it's been an hour and a half, and I feel like we could talk forever.
Me
So
too.
maybe we have another
we can
interview.
Part two.
Thank you for being willing to do this, because this is my first time having like a live interview with someone, and I have a feeling it might just be the first of many. And I would love to share your healing process, because I know it's inspiring for other people who are wondering to what extent and how they want to dive into the detox work. I know you're going to be an amazing health coach, and I really honor your strength and your elegance, you know.
Thank you.
In all of this, and just you're a bright light, and that's what the world needs right now. So we've got to just keep shining the light on everything and being authentic and moving forward. You've
been an incredible support for me, and I think doing the HTMA was the best thing. It was, the best thing I've ever done for my health. It was the beginning of the step in the right direction. And I think sharing our stories, like you say, it does help to inspire others. I've been inspired by many people like yourself along this journey who have overcome chronic migraines. And if we can do it, then anyone can. Mm-hmm. We can do it, but there is a process that has to unfold. Absolutely. And it's sometimes painful, isn't it, to get there? But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. And we'll
thank you.
Have a fabulous day. Really.
Okay. Bye, Maria.
Take care.
Bye.